Good morning, everybody. We do things early in Indiana. I was just driving around this morning. No, I wasn't just driving around. I was actually driving here. And I was like, this traffic is like the 8 o'clock traffic we have in Philadelphia. So, fair play to you, the early bird. I also have a daughter named Camille, and another daughter named Clyde with the CA for you. So, if you're having another one, I have a name for you. All right, so very quickly, because I only have a half an hour, and those who were unfortunate enough to be there last night know that this man can talk. And I tried myself on that a little bit, but I think there's so much to be said on these issues that it's hard to get it into a framework. But I think I have one for this morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the research, but not that much. But because the panels that have been set up afterwards are about the different pathways that young people take, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we came to sort of find those pathways and how we make sense of the journeys that young people take in their early years of adulthood, those who come from small towns. And how at one stage we had this kind of eureka moment that this wasn't just about the town of since we published the book, I can't tell you how many unsolicited emails we've had, which is, trust me, I published a book that barely made a ripple before it, but how many unsolicited emails we've had from people who either were young themselves and grew up in a small town, or I grew up in a small town 3 or 4 decades ago, and to a person, what they say to us is this, that this book was about my town, this book was about me. I don't think you can have any greater accolade as an author for someone to say that you describe really how I grew up and the stuff. So, okay, so the pathways. So we were interviewing young adults, and we were charged with sort of covering the sort of rural part of America. This was a larger comparative study. A book came out this year, finally, on the larger study that included some stuff about ours. It's called Coming of Age in America. And, so we interviewed people who were roughly 5 to 7 years out of high school and roughly 9 to 11 years out of high school, trying to capture the mid-20s, the late 20s kind of thing. And it was done because that's what they wanted in the research network. But this was a perfect way to really uncover what it is like to come of age in a small town, because we'll get people sometimes 7 years out, sometimes 10 years out, who had taken a pathway, a specific pathway. The pathway really is in response to the 2 major questions that every young person who grows up in a small town or a rural area basically faces. Those 2 questions are, do I stay or do I go? And if I go, do I ever come back? And when we figured that out, we could map the sort of the journeys that these young people had made. And so we had 3 large groups, and there's some sort of smaller groups within them. We had leavers, we had stayers, and we had returners. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about them and the sort of the subgroups in them, and why this is an issue that, in essence, is a local issue, certainly shaped by non-local factors. But then I hope I can begin to show you that the changes that you make at the local level and the policies that you put in place can really turn this thing around. Okay, so that's the goal this morning. So these pathways anyway, so we had the leavers, and of the leavers we had 2 groups. We had what we call achievers. And the achievers are the young people who seem to get the lion's share of resources in their small town, in terms of education, in terms of mentoring, in terms of collective cultivation. These are the kids who are always at the forefront of things. See, I'm right? That was an affirmation from the people. And the achievers talk about themselves in terms that they were set apart from a very early age. They always felt that they were destined to do great things. One young woman who was a valedictorian, when we interviewed her, she was in Kansas City and doing very well for herself, spoke about how she felt that she was, quote, set forth to do great things. Okay? Another young woman talked about how she felt the town always had her back. And the achievers, you know, had a certain ambivalence about that, because they knew that this was an unequal share of the collective resources of the town. And the achievers, by and large, are those most likely to leave and never come back. Now, small towns have always done this. You prepare your best and your brightest to spread their wings, if that's going to be the case, and to go seek the opportunities that their talents seem to so richly deserve. But I'm just going to leave that there for now. But you know, this is, you know, think about this. You're putting a lot of your resources into the very people that will never benefit your town, really. Because if they're gone, they're not helping you. And it's not to say that this is a bad thing, it's not a bad thing. But the allocation of resources, you have to be very, very careful how you do that. Okay, so that's our achievers. Our seekers are young people who want to see the world. They have a desire to go past the environs of the small town, but they're not chosen to be groomed to do so. So our seekers take the time-honored, time-worn path of not always, but mostly going into the military. Rural areas and small towns in America have always sent a disproportionate number of young people into the armed forces. This is no more or no less true today. In fact, if you look at the numbers that the Carr Institute in Maine produced a little over 2 years ago, you'll see that of all, if you just break it up, it's kind of a crude breakup, but you have metropolitan America, big cities, you have the exurban America, the suburbs, and you have non-metro America, so the rural areas and small towns. Non-metro America, per capita sends way more into the armed forces than the others do. And our seekers talked about, you know, how this was wonderful for them, how, you know, this gave them a chance. But one of the things I talked about last night was the sort of the double-edged sword of joining the military now, is that, you know, you get some money for sure because it's an all-volunteer army, and you have to keep up the numbers when they're, you know, still fighting, but almost done with one of them, 2 wars, right? Is that a lot of the stuff they're told by recruiters about how their education will be helped is sometimes, if not a lie, then certainly, you know, mythical in some ways. I gave the example of the young woman we spoke with on several occasions, who was a naval nurse, and she was just approaching the end of the 9 years that she had committed. She was an instructor at this stage. She had served active duty in the Gulf during the Iraq War. She'd been in operating theaters when, you know, soldiers were brought in, injured and so forth. Terrific experience, just, you know, wonderfully experienced person. But she told us, she said, well, you know, when I leave here, if I want to be an RN, I have to go back to college and start from scratch. There is nothing that I've done here, nothing that I've learned here can translate into any credit. And, you know, as I said last night, I think that's kind of shameful. To lead our young people into this sort of false belief that what they have is going to be immediately usable when you finish your service. So those are our leavers, our achievers and our seekers. We have stayers. These are the guys who, in terms of the resource issue, get the least. These are the guys who, you know, have always, in small towns, just assumed that they'll get a job. And for many years this was true, because small towns did pretty well with agriculture, certainly with industry and manufacturing, that there were jobs, and there were good jobs. And even if they weren't there in your town, there were commutable jobs, good union, blue-collar jobs. For our guys in Ellis, the historical great job, best job in the world for the Stairs was John Deere. So it's about 100 miles each way commute, but that's like no problem to rely on. And, you know, the grandfather worked at John Deere's, the father worked at John Deere's, they pulled the next generation in. But that's changed, because now John Deere, they might hire the son, but he won't get a union wage. he probably won't get any benefits. And he is going to be laid off periodically. The guys that we knew that were working in Deer hotels, they lay us off. And then the kicker is when they lay us off for about 6 months, call us back in, say, oh, well, you know, things are bad, we're going to have to pay you less. And that one benefit that you did have, it's gone, I'm afraid. And that's the way of manufacturing, it's the way of companies that have to keep their share price up and so on. But the Stairs, you know, talk about themselves. They're very aware of their position. They're very aware that they're not very highly thought of. They're very aware that, you know, one guy puts it this way. He says, look, in high school, he's talking about the hierarchy in high school. So you have your smart kids, you have your medium kids, you have your low kids, and there I was way down below the low kids. Right? They're very aware that there's in some ways the cast offs. But here's the deal. These are the guys that are going to be the future of your town because they stay. So by not investing somehow in them, and I'm not saying it's easy, by not investing somehow in these guys early on and getting them ready for the kinds of jobs that are in your local and your regional economy, that's a huge, huge mistake. Our Stairs even knew this because one of the guys, and a lot of it's to do with the time periods that they were in high school in the early 90s, just when computer technology was exploding all around the globe, right? And he didn't learn any because he was in shop or whatever. And he says, look, he says, I can break rock, I can do construction. But he said, most of the good jobs, you have to be sitting on your butt behind a computer, and I don't know the first thing about them. So part of, you know, thinking about the Stairs is not just the ones coming up, which, you know, is a big deal, but how to retrain those that are already there. Okay? All right. Then we have the returners, two groups of returners. We have what we call this, the larger group, boomerangs, people who leave for a very short period of time, but they always mean to come back. So our boomerangs, you know, start out with the notion that, you know, whatever time I'm going to be away, I'm going to come back to the town. And these are predominantly women, whereas the Stairs are predominantly male. The reasons that they go away are usually to community college for a certification or an associate's degree in some cases, and then they come back after a short period of time. Some actually even are not technically away all the time because they'll kind of commute, you know, so do a suitcase thing. And, you know, as I said, you know, and these guys are in small towns, and they're relatively well trained for the modern workforce, depending on where you are. Community colleges have a huge role to play, and VOTECs have a huge role to play in, again, equipping these young people with the skills that they need for the 21st century workforce. Okay. And then the very smallest group of all, but the one that attracts the most attention when you talk to policymakers and you talk to people in local towns, are what we call high flyers. And high flyers are the small professional group that every place needs. So in terms of, you know, medical services, your doctors, your nurses, your dentists and so on, teachers, lawyers, not that many lawyers really. I think the problem in America is that there are too many of those guys. Lawyer, you need the one lawyer, you'll do all you need to do. And entrepreneurs, right? These are the guys that are that sort of crucial cadre of people who have a specific skill, a professional skill. And one of the ways, our eureka moment that I spoke of later was this. When we were doing the research, when we were living in Alice, the local Rotary asked us to come and do a lunch talk, you know, this is a big deal. Talk about our research. So we were very happy about that. So we ran off to the Rotary and started blah, blah, blah about the research.